Okay, we're good to go. So, okay, leathering cosplay. This is going to be a relatively basic overview. I am going to simplify a lot of points just for the sake of brevity. There's a lot to talk about. Leather is in itself a ancient form of crafting. Jesus, it goes back many, many years now. Arguably, it's one of the first form of garment making in itself. It is built upon many years, as an understatement, of knowledge, craft techniques, hidden secrets, you name it, there's a lot to it. So yes, obviously I'm going to try and keep this as relatively simple as I can to make sure it's easy to digest, easy to understand, and ideally give anybody here who is considering working with leather a good understanding of what kind of leather they need and how it can enhance their costumes and their projects. Anybody here got any experience with working with real leather before? And on the same note, anybody here never worked with it before but are really keen to add it to their cosplay to a certain extent? Own a melt belt, yep, that's a good place to start. I'll be talking about that a lot. Belts are how I got started. Belts are how I think everybody should start. You can learn so much from trying to make your first belt. Middle leather skirt, nice, ambitious. Okay, seems like a little range of understandings and skill levels here. This should hopefully help answer a few questions that you probably should ask but may not know to ask. I find a lot of things when it comes to learning a new skill are asking questions, but you don't know what questions you need to ask in order to learn. So I'm going to try and preemptively tell you information, hopefully answer a few questions, and by the very end, assuming we have time, I'll ask and answer any questions that you may have left. So for that reason, if you do get questions as we go through, hold on to them, don't lose them, put it somewhere safe, and ask it at the very end when I let you know it's question time. Okay, so this is a very relatively comprehensive guide. It was put together by myself, my partner in crime and partner Chloe, and Wigwig Cosplay, who you may know for winning ICL back in 2019, I want to say. There's a few photos in here as well from my leather mentor. He taught me quite a number of advanced techniques, and he works film and TV. He judged Crown back in 2023. His name is Robin Careless. Wonderful leather crafter. Yeah, there's a few cool Easter eggs in here from projects he's worked on, so nice to share that with you. Anyway, let's begin. So, what we hope to cover in this hour. We can go on longer than an hour if need be, but yeah, this is what it is. Okay, so like I said, basic understanding of the leather types, leatherworking tools, tips, tricks, how to apply leather in cosplay, and where to get supplies. Now, where to get supplies, I should stress here, is a little trickier for reasons I'll come to far later on, but I'm sure a lot of you can guess. I'm not from South Africa, and I don't know a lot of the best places. I know of one off the top of my head, but it's going to be quite clear that without actually being in your country and searching from your internet, you know, we call it VPNing over there, I'm not realistically going to know. And also, you'll see that leather is very unique. One hide of leather is very different from another hide of leather. Leather goes through a process called tanning, where it takes the raw carved leather and makes it usable, durable, all kinds of other urable things. That is what gives it, I was going to say unique flavor, but you'd think I'm here eating my leather in my spare time. What, I'm not South African? Oh no, I've been rumbled. Please don't kick me out. I've got away with it this long. God, I love your beef jerky for that point, which is also another point, but we'll come to that in a moment. Anyway, we'll discuss those topics as we discuss them. So, why use leather? There are pros and there are cons, as there are with everything. I'm going to be upfront with a lot of the drawbacks, and I'll try and sell you on the positives. So, first one, it's durable. Leather, unsurprisingly, can withstand a good couple of punches. It's used in utility for industrial use, for safety harnesses. It's used in military purposes. It's durable for a reason, and it's been well used for so many years for very good reason. Durability is one of the big ones. I mean, it's been used as armor through the Middle Ages, medieval period. It's even used as armor this day and age. It's great. Biodegradability. It's environmentally friendly. I'll answer a preemptive question on that in a moment. But yes, it is better for the environment than, say, pleather, which is a horrible thing made of plastic. And and also terrible for the planet, but there's some forms of leather that aren't great either. Again, we'll come to that in a minute. Utility. So yeah, if you ever wanted to make a pouch, making it out of real leather, it will work, it will function. I have thrown pouches across a room and it's been fine. It has got great use. Belts, as I was saying earlier, are amazing. Leather harnesses. Oh my god, we've got a few dirty people in here. Okay, wonderful. Well, there's a good utility for it as well. Okay, it showcases an impressive skill. One incredible thing with it is that there are complexities to it, and because it is not commonly used as much as, say, foam, warbler, textile manipulation, sewing in general, it's something that isn't uncommon now. It used to be very rare that you'd see it at all, but it is catching on more and more. People are finding it more accessible, and the information out there is being better understood. Ethical. So, I know with the UK, all of the leather that we have, bar rabbit skin and goat skin, is all from byproduct of the meat industry. So no animals are being raised just to kill them for the leather in the UK. I have checked this. It is mostly the same for South Africa also, especially cow and pig, which are the most common versions of leather that you will use. There are a few more wacky leathers that I have found while I was browsing in South Africa. You have access to a lot of exotic types of leather, so I cannot guarantee how ethical they are. Just try and do a bit of your research first if ethics are a major factor for you. But if you eat meat, you eat hamburgers, you eat all that good stuff, no offense to any vegans in the chat, then yes, you can rest assured that nothing is being wasted from the animal who has lost its life in order to make your leather cosplay. Next point, though, a little bit crass after what I was just saying there. You can make leather goods as a gift. They sell very well. You see people at cons selling harnesses, as someone said in the chat there. It's used in a wide range of commercial uses, I'll put it that way. Leather goods sell quite well, and generally the markup on them tends to be very high, which is a great way of turning a profit. If you were looking to go into a more of a commercial approach, maybe you want to do something outside of just cosplay and costume making in general, maybe you want to go into selling belts, pouches, or hats. Hat making is kind of crazy difficult though, but yes, it makes for wonderful gifts too. I am always known now as the guy who gives really good Secret Santa gifts at my work, so yeah. It also doesn't take me long to make stuff, and it seems to impress easy, so I am happy to not have to spend my money, use my scrap leather to make random gifts, and hey, all good. Versatility. So you want to hear me talk about belts and pouches a lot because they are so widely used in many, many different types of costumes. It has a great range of uses. The biggest one to me, though, is this last point, is authenticity. This is a very visceral craft. You can tell and you can feel why so many people have worked with it for so many years. It's the difference between looking at a set of leather armor and going, yes, I could make some foam that looks like that convincingly, and I've actually made that armor and it is the thing that it looks like. It's a really nice feeling when you know that you have made it one-to-one, and I can't think of it feels very genuine, very diegetic. That authentic feeling, it's very real. Okay, the cons to using leather. So I've skirted around them a little bit talking about the pros, but the most obvious one, as I'm sure you won't be surprised, is that it's not vegan. And we do need to really stress this here. If you can't get past the barrier where you are working with an animal product, leatherworking is not going to be for you. And I will be honest, there are some types of leather that I can't use because I love animals. Some of it feels too real to me, and I have to disconnect myself a little bit from an animal that's died, the same way I do when I'm eating meat. And I can't work with rabbit fur. I just can't. Rabbit fur, it's got a great range of uses. It tends to be quite cheap too, but it's so soft. It feels like I'm stroking a cat. I cannot get myself past that in my head, and I just won't work with it because, like I said, it feels too real and I can't get that disconnect in my head. So yes, you do need to go into it knowing that this is an animal product, so you should be as respectful as you can to the process. The other big one is it is expensive. There's no two ways about that. It is a very expensive craft. Tools within themselves will last you a very long time because leather tools are generally built to last, at least good ones. So you tend to put a big investment down on those. But then hides themselves, they, depending on how much you need, they rack up quickly. There are some ways to work around that expense. Buying scrap leather from leather shops that make their own goods. I know there's one, as an example, in Chicago where I bought giant hides, and yeah, it's got a few holes and cuts punched into it that make it awkward to work with. But for doing smaller pieces, for doing things again like pouches or dice bags or little bits, you can get it for basically nothing, because to them, they are essentially trying to throw that away. And they'd rather sell it on for cheap than just lose it and get nothing out of it. So leather scraps are a great way to find cheap leather. When he said I bought 3 dustbin bags full of for 300 Rand, you can, yeah, you really can. I've had people give me veg tan leather scraps before. Like, you can get it cheap. You probably may not get a giant hide of it cheap. It's very unlikely you do, because it's not expiring or going rotten or anything quite like that. It's generally going to be scraps that you find cheaper. Yes, exactly. Cut-offs too. That's also a great way of getting them. Cut-off scraps, similar sort of thing. You find it in so many uses, and with these pieces, people tend to want to be as respectful as they can, like I said earlier, about the hide that they've got. It's an animal product. You don't really just want to throw it in the bin. Some pieces are too small that you can't really do anything further with, but some pieces, places just don't want to throw it away, so they'd rather sell it for cheap. Next one. It is physically demanding. Kind of is the best way I can put that, but you do need to know it's going to be exhausting working with it. For the most part, you are generally going to be hand sewing everything, cutting everything by hand, punching all the holes yourself by hand. Like, a lot of work goes into it. It's time consuming, it's exhausting. I've worked in 40-degree centigrade heat before trying to work on leather stuff. It's a grueling process. I have a funny thing now where I look back on everything with leatherwork and think, oh yeah, that's my favorite bit to it. And then when I'm actually working and doing that part of the process, and they're thinking, I really fucking hate this, and I really hate every decision I've made that has led me to this point. I have a love-hate relationship with it at points. But yes, it is going to be exhausting working with it. You don't need to be physically strong. I wouldn't even say it really helps. It could certainly help, especially if you've got muscles built for endurance, but it's going to be exhausting. Just keep that in mind going into it. The biggest one, though, it is unforgiving. If you fuck up what you're working on, it is probably fucked up forever, and there's probably nothing you can do to fix it. Probably. It depends case to case. If you've accidentally cut something a little bit too short, you can still work with that. I once made a quiver for, bows and arrows and all that sort of jazz, and I cut it too short, and I cut into it, slipped, tore a bit of a hole into it, and I just had to cut it shorter from that point. And I was kicking myself for it because it wasn't perfect, but I could still work with it and not have to throw everything away. But I have made some horrible mistakes working with leather, and this is, I'd say, the biggest reason why people don't get into it, is because that factor is very intimidating. The thought of dyeing a piece of leather wrong and now it is no longer usable is a horrible feeling. I've done that with a giant harness belt before, or went the wrong color, couldn't get the color out. There are ways you can get the color out, but it never was going to be back to what it was, and getting color out of leather tends to dry it out horrendously. It is a horrible sinking feeling because it's money and time wasted at that point, and you're just there thinking, I hate this, I hate my life, I hate everything that I've done. Keep in mind, you are probably going to be faced with a situation like that going into it knowing nothing. You can still use these things for scrap pieces or for smaller projects later on, so always put it to one side, keep it safe. But yeah, it's a horrible feeling when you mess it up because you can't exactly glue it back together or easily stitch it back together unless it sort of works with the character you're choosing. It's pretty hard when you hit that wall. Okay, environmental risks. So there is one type of leather, it's a particular type of tanning called chrome tan. It's not great for the environment. My leather mentor hates working with a lot of chrome tan leathers. He prefers veg tan and tends to stick to only doing projects with veg tan. You'll understand what these words mean in a minute. But chrome tan leathers tend to be worse for the environment and don't decompose as well as you'd like. It is a fundamental form of leather though, and you'll understand why this could be an issue for you later on. I think even the next slide for that point too. Okay, and like I said earlier, it is intimidating. Leather does tend to seem very intimidating coming into it. Like I said, it's expensive and it's unforgiving. You fuck up, you wasted a lot of money, and that is enough to put people off. And trying to develop your skills for it, a lot of your first projects are going to be kind of rough, and you're going to really criticize yourself for little blame. I mean, we're cosplayers, we all criticize ourselves. We prejudge ourselves every single day we wake up and look in the mirror. Anyway, it can be intimidating. Try and get past that. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just go into it willing to learn if you do make the mistakes. And you may find a use for anything you mess up later down the line. Let's move on though. Right, different types of leather to get you started. So, veg tan and chrome tan. These are the two most important types to know. They have subcategories on that. There's a few on the screen right now. Veg tan leather is, as it says, vegetable tanned leather. It is almost always undyed. If you find it dyed, it's gone through this raw sort of beigey looking color first, and then it's been dyed by whoever's selling it after the fact. But veg tan normally comes out undyed, ready to dye, and it will absorb moisture really, really easily. Veg tan, it is great for stuff like belts. It's very rigid, it's hard, it's used in armor, it's used in gauntlets. I've seen some people make shoes out of it, which is kind of strange, because, like I said, it's very rigid. It doesn't really take or form too easily without lots of moisture. Veg tan, bread and butter. A lot of people start with veg tan. I started with veg tan. If you're going to make a belt, you want veg tan. Chrome tan now. This is probably my preferred type of leather to work with. Like I said, it's bad for the environment, but it's really flexible. It has a lot of movement to it. It tends to be a lot softer too from the tanning process. You'll use this for making things like clothes, for doing thicker pieces that you want lots of mobility on. The best way I can describe the difference between these two, and if there are any leather experts here, please don't kill me for saying this. Veg tan is like working with high density EVA foam. Chrome tan is like working with low density EVA foam. That's a good comparison. Chrome tan also works a bit more like pleather in some ways. Pleather is just interfacing on the back of a plastic sheet that sort of gives it that movement and structure. Chrome tan is what you make leather jackets from, as an example. It is also referred to as garment leather at times, or subcategories of it are referred to as garment leather. If you're coming into this from two different perspectives, say like you only worked with foam stuff before, or you only like sewing stuff, chrome tan will be easier to learn if you are coming into this from a sewing background, veg tan coming into it if you're coming from a foam smithing background, I wouldn't describe it. That's a good comparison to understand the two. They're really thick for veg tan, really soft and flexible for chrome tan. Again, clothing, you want chrome tan, armor, veg tan, and things that you want to be durable like belts and pouches. Okay, now we have a few interesting pieces. So, lambskin. Specific use, lambskin is really good for things like gloves. It tends to be quite thin. It is very, very soft to the touch. It's really, really nice material to actually feel. I just can't look a lamb in the eyes anymore. I really like using it for gloves. It's a very specific use. It's not as strong, durable, and it will rip with enough pressure because of how thin it tends to be. It's a lot more of a delicate leather, but for that reason, it's great for things that need to be flexible, like on your hands, like for gloves, for example. And it feels nice on your hands too, which is also a big bonus, along with being waterproof too. You'd like to add that. Some abattoirs sell the raw hides when they're done skinning. Rawhide is, it's not what I put here. It has very specific uses. Rawhide tends to be as thick as a brick. It is very, like the only stuff I use rawhide on is shoe soles. When you're making a sole from scratch, I use rawhide for that. That's pretty much the only thing I have a good use for it because it is just so firm and hard to work with. Milled leather is the next one I'll talk about. It's not super common because it's a veg tan that acts like a chrome tan. It's weird. It's really weird is the best way I can describe that. If you need to make, let's say, a undersuit that has to be really durable, take a few scratches, punches, and not tear easily, but also still needs to have some level of flexibility, milled leather is good for that. I find its uses are so unbelievably specific, and it also tends to dye weird, which is strange to say. Again, with all types of leather, do swatches first when it comes to the dyeing part, because different tanning processes, even veg tan, one leather studio will veg tan differently from another one. Everyone's got their own recipes and a bunch of other things, so they can absorb dye differently and turn to a different color. I've got milled leather that I have dyed brown and it's turned orange. I've got milled leather that I've dyed black and it's turned blue. Do swatches, it's very situational, but it can be good to know that it's there available for you. An example of stuff I've used it for is gauntlets. Flexible gauntlet, but I still need to be durable, so it's not gonna, break or wrinkle up too easily. It's just a good base for that particular use. Suede. Suede's great. We all love suede. Feels good too. Suede. I use it in garments. I used it for quilting in a gambeson before. I've used it for certain types of lining. It's a good way of adding structure onto other pieces of leather too. Suede's wonderful. I really like suede. I'm trying to think of what else I use it other than lining. Pigskin is also a type of suede. It tends to be a lot thinner though. So the lambskin equivalent of suede. I use it for leather lining. Leather lining is very tricky. Most places won't even bother to do it. It's something you really only see, I guess, master level people doing. It's going to sound so unga bunga, but let's say that you've got a gauntlet and you now want to line the inside of it so it's not just that sort of bristly leather feeling on the inside. You pretty much just contact cement both sides and stick them together. Sounds easy. It's a nightmare because pigskin is so thin and moves so easily and will want to stick to itself if you're not careful. I tend to put the pigskin face down, put the glue on one side, glue on the other piece I'm using, and stick it on top of the pigskin, then trim it away afterwards. It gives a great finish, and it looks fantastic too, and then you sew it all down afterwards. Those are the uses I have for pigskin and suede in general. Again, though, suede's got a great set of utility. You can make trousers from it if you'd like to, with a certain thinness of it. I've used it for gloves at one point too, actually, thinking back on it now. It's nice. I make shoes out of it too, come to think of it. Shit. The uses are just all pouring back to me. Suede's great. I like suede. Keep that in mind if you're ever working with leather. Suede is wonderful. But to summarize this bit, veg tan, chrome tan, they're your two bread and butter pieces. I should also say with chrome tan leather, it is always pre-dyed. Always. I'm pretty sure I'm almost certain you'll never see a chrome tan that is undyed and ready to dye, because it doesn't really absorb moisture the way that, say, veg tan does. Just on that note too, in case there is anyone here who wants to work with leather but can't or doesn't want to work with animal product for any reason, there are some faux leathers that kind of work like leather now. It's a field of, not really technology, or how would you describe it? It's a field of research that's becoming increasingly better. Standard leather, I think, is generally quite crap. But now you're getting things like berry leather and mushroom leather, and they are very similar to veg tan in a lot of ways. So accessibility with it is starting to get there. I have not tested this enough on myself. I don't know what is available to you there, but there are new developments happening with that all the time. So keep an eye out in case you can't get past that. There may be alternatives for you to work with where the same rules here will apply. Grounded reference. Yeah, actually, yeah, berry leather, come to think of it. No, that's true. We were talking about grounded as well. It's a real thing. I found out about it when I was doing this panel with Robin in Chicago back in April? God, it's June. Holy shit. Not to date this VOD, that's the word when it goes out. There we go. Yeah. It was weird to find out some of these things existed. I know Robin had tested mushroom leather, and his response was, it's really weird. So yeah, improvements are happening to make these things more accessible. Moving on. Okay, leather thicknesses. I tried looking this up, and I couldn't find the answer. There are two ways of measuring leather. In the UK, we use millimeter. We measure how thick it is on average, and that is how we sell it. So we'll sell veg tan leather for 1.5 millimeter thick, up to about 3 to 4 millimeter thick. In America, they use, and Canada, fuck's sake, they use ounces. They weigh the leather. And my response to it has always been, I don't understand why you weigh your leather. There are conversion charts out there for it. I understand that the approximate weight calculation for it equals to the thickness that it will be. It's still dumb. So I'm going to use millimeters to work my way through this. So, generally speaking, you're going to find most chrome tan leathers that you will want to use for clothing to be around 0.8 to 1.5 millimeters thick. With veg tan leather, God, I actually should have written this down. Veg tan leather, 3 millimeters is very thick. I use 3 millimeters for belts. I use 2 millimeters for armor and 1 millimeter for smaller details like sewn overlays. Like I want to stitch a particular like looking trim or pattern onto it. I'll use 1 millimeter veg tan leather for that. Chrome tan, like I said, generally it's 0.8 to 1.5 millimeter for clothing. Depends how thick you want the clothing to be. If it's too thin, it will still tear and not be as robust as you want it. Too thick and it's not going to be very flexible. You can still get chrome tan leather in up to 3 millimeters thickness. It will have some bend to it, and it does have some uses, but not as commonly used. It varies tremendously. Try and keep those in mind for now. If you don't remember it, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I have this unique gift where I can look at any reference and tell you exactly what type of leather you need for it. It is a freaky thing I can do. Anyway, I'm trying to think if there's any other points on this one I should go over. Why did I do this with Americans? I love them to pieces, but why did I do this with Americans? Yeah, I use 2 millimeter for pouches as well, come to think of it. Again, veg tan has structure. You want the pouch to look like a particular shape. Veg tan's great for that. I have made chrome tan pouches before. They're a lot more flexible. I tried doing it after Monster Hunter made all of their pouches weirdly flexible. It's so fucking dumb. It doesn't really work the way that it works in the game. Video game designers have no idea how leather works for the most part. It's very rare that you do. So the reason why I do a lot of Monster Hunter cosplays in general is because for the most part, they're pretty good. They even know seam accuracy, which is kind of terrifying. Anyway, you don't need to hear me ramble. Let's get going. So, applying leather skills to cosplay. Where can you add it? So, big armor builds will need some form of attachment system. Leather straps. Makes sense. A leather strap is not going to give under pressure. Like I said, it's got good utility for a reason. It can hold up a lot of weight. Straps are one of the most common uses for leather. Even back in the medieval era, they're still using leather to attach metal pieces together. They're doing that to this day still, where they're using leather to attach heavy industrial pieces together. It's really, really useful for making it so that you can get in and out of your outfit without worrying that suddenly it's going to tear or it's going to break. You rivet that shit in and it works, and I love it. Many characters worry about like I said, you're not going to hear me shut the fuck up about belts. Belts are a great place to start. It is a long strip of leather, and all you have to do is punch a couple of holes into it and stick a buckle on it. It is that simple to begin with. You can make it more complex from there. You can add a lining to it and stitch that in. You can get different tools to make it so you can do it more consistently. If you're looking to get started with leather, you can even buy belt blanks, which are pre-cut strips of leather to be the length of a belt for your particular size that you need, and you can just boom, 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 done. Baby's first leather belt. It is really satisfying when you know that it's hard to fuck up and it can just come together, and because so many characters wear belts, you're going to be... I've made so many fucking belts, because every video game likes to have a million belts on everything. Yeah, I can't stress how useful having your own leather belt that you have made yourself is. I'm trying to think of any other ways I can stress that. I mean, I made a leather belt for my crown costume last year. I now wear that belt for my day-to-day. I wear it pretty much all the time. There was an awkward moment where I realized I've only brought one leather belt with me, and it's the one I'm wearing right now, and I have to put my costume on display in front of me. I just have to whip off my leather belt and hold my trousers up for the rest of the weekend. Belts are great. Belts are a really good place to start and learn from. There are a lot of different techniques, and I'll talk to you a little bit about them as we go on a little bit here, that help you hone, refine, and finish these things better. Decorative leather wrapping on weapon handles. Yep, you see that all the time. Using real leather, great way to enhance it. Shows that you can work with that technique to a certain degree. Leather gloves, also really good. I prefer working with leather for gloves than I do pleather or most other forms of fabric. It does what it says on the tin is the best way to describe it. You punch your hole and you sew through that hole. Once your hole is there because you planned out where it's going to be, it is just as unga bunga simple as needle go through. That is actually the logic that helped me understand leatherworking. You punch the holes beforehand and then you sew it. Like I said, I'm known as the unga bunga boy for a reason. Okay, anywhere that you would use pleather, try real leather instead. Pretty self-explanatory there. You'll see a lot of cheap cosplays from China all the time. They use pleather for making faux-looking belts. They look a bit crap because they don't have any structure. Change it out for a veg tan leather belt instead. Really enhances the costume. I've done it with a few bought costumes where I've just decided to do my own leather work for it and just whip those bits off, whip my own other bits on, and it looks way better already. The difference it can make in quality is quite substantial. Even if you're not looking to do this for a competition, but you want the outfit to look better than a cheap bought costume, then great way to do it. Just stick your own leather bits onto it. Okay, applying leather skills to the cosplay now. So why should you do it? Challenge yourself. It is another totally valid and interesting technique to use to give yourself more storage. Again, here we go, leather pouches. The authenticity that we're talking about earlier. Diversify your skill set a little bit. You'll no longer be known as the foam boy or the sewing boy or whichever kind of boy that you think you are. You're now a guy who can do both. Longevity. Your leather bits are going to last you a long time. Something people are starting to find out more and more now is Warbler breaks down as time goes on. Foam also deteriorates and is terrifyingly tasty to rodents, I have found out from a friend. So a lot of these things can get destroyed and perish easily. Leather won't let you down. Leather's got your back. I know if anyone's got the back, leather's got my back. To feel more like the character. Again, that authenticity is a nice element to have with it. I can't stress authenticity enough. You'll know it when you feel it and you'll feel great for it. And it does very well in the competitive circuit right now also. No two ways I can put that. Not everyone uses leather. When it turns up, it generally is quite impressive to see people working with it in whatever capacity. It's a good way to help make yourself stand out from the crowd, I guess, is one way of describing it. Again, more techniques, the better. The better you can do those techniques, the further you'll go. All right, now we get into the good stuff. The basics. The basic tools that you will need now to work with leather. First one is obvious. A sharp tool for cutting leather. Okay, your leather's going to come in a hide. You're going to have a pattern. You're going to need to cut that pattern out. How do you do it? With chrome tan pieces, I generally just use sharp scissors. It just cuts really easily, and unlike with fabric, it doesn't fray or anything. You just got that edge there, and it's totally fine. I'll use scissors for it. You'll see giant cutting blades too for leather for thick pieces of veg tan. They just slice through it beautifully. You can get specific leather cutting knives and scissors for it. You can get hobby knives. I've got a friend who works with scalpels to do it. I've got one guy I know who uses a laser cutter for it, and God, the smell is horrible. But anyway, something to cut the leather. Obviously, you need to cut the leather. Those are a few things that are used to cut leather. Next up, though, a fork punch. This will not apply if you're machine sewing leather. Machine sewing, I will come to later. But if you're hand sewing, you are going to need a way of going through the leather in specific areas so you can sew it. This is known as a hole punch or a fork punch. A fork punch is the one on the right here. It is a set of prongs looking like a wacky trident. They come in sizes of 1, 2, 4, 6. I've seen something up to 12. You're essentially just punching a symmetrical line through the leather so you can sew through it later. Makes sense? I hope that all makes sense. I know some leather workers who will use specific like 1mm hole punches that you have to hammer through, they're useful. It's actually quite a smart way of doing it, but you're going to be doing it for every single hole, so the holes tend to be bigger jumps. Anyway, fork punch, good one to have. Next up, as I was saying just then, a hammer. There is old reliable there. I'll talk about that specific hammer in a second. Commonly, you'll see people start with mallets. It works. I started with a metal hammer. That is a mistake. It will push it through firmly. So let's say you're trying to do a hole punch, fork punch. It's trying to say you're putting your holes in for sewing. You're going to want to whack that through with a bit of force because it needs to go through relatively thick leather in most parts. Not always, but sometimes. Metal hammer will get it there, but it will destroy your tools, and it will cut their longevity in half, almost down to a quarter, for how much damage metal on metal will do. Also relatively unsafe. Hitting metal on metal is always a bad idea because it can fracture the metal and chunks of it blast off. And I have known instances like that have crippled people. Getting a chunk of metal into your body, as we know from bullets, will do a lot of damage, so never a good idea. Rubber mallet has some drawbacks. Hitting something with a rubber mallet, as you know, bounces back a little bit. So your punching of that fork punch is not going to go through as easily with a rubber mallet. I recommend a rawhide mallet, which is that toffee-looking motherfucker on a stick there. It will hit as hard as a metal hammer without doing the damage to the tools. It works really, really well. I've changed that 2 years ago, and I have never looked back. That was a great choice. But still, rubber mallet is cheap and a good way to start. Rawhide mallet sounds so violent. It does sound a little bit violent. It's pretty metal. Okay, next up, an awl. So, awl is just a metal, sharp-looking pointy stick. I'm holding mine now and I'm thinking how better to describe it. It's like a long needle with a nice sort of handle that you can hold. Historically, every hole was punched with an awl. That's at least where they started. I use it now more for going through certain holes where I'm struggling to get a needle through, just to make it a bit thicker. I will use occasionally if I can't get a fork punch all the way through because it's trying to sew multiple pieces of leather together. It will still force a hole. Having plan B is always a good idea, just so you're not stuck. There's a few different types of owls. Your general standard type of owl is what you need. You can get ones with a slight taper so they get thicker, also good for stretching out holes, good to have. And then you get auto owls, which is a different type of sewing. I will not cover that here. It's a little bit more complicated, but an owl is a handy tool to have, and it also sounds cute. Leather needles. Okay, so a lot of different types of needles. There are leather needles for hand sewing, and I never use them. I use tapestry needles. I know people that use, what do you call it, embroidery needles. I've used standard needles at some point. I have started using leather needles more recently, and curved needles are quite specific. A needle's a needle. I like tapestry needles because they have a bigger hole and it's easier to thread, and I got big, clunky, unga-bunga hands and I roll low on dexterity, okay? That's the best way I can describe it. Also tends to go through a lot of leathers easier because it's a kind of a thicker needle. Curved needles are good for doing corners where you can't get to the inside. So main time that I had to use a curved needle was making the butt of a quiver. So when I'm trying to sew that butt onto it, I can't reach all the way inside the quiver at this point to sew it in, so the curved needle has to poke through the first hole and the second hole simultaneously, so I can sort of keep going in a circular motion to sew it. Anyway, needles are needles. They'll work. They're a sharp bit of metal for pushing your thread through. And talking of that motherfucker, are threads. Different types of thread. Linen wax thread is the most common. It's exactly as it says. It is thread that is coated in wax. Why is it coated in wax, you may ask? It is so that it holds in the leather stronger and firmer. And at the very end, if you've seen leather tutorials, you'll see that they melt the end of the thread. Some people tie it and melt it, some people just melt it and they sort of force it down. That way it will never come undone. It is melted in place. You've now stitched it together and melted it in too. You get different types of this. You get nylon, and you get... Shit, what's the other one? There's nylon and there's another on one. One of them's UV resistant. There's no real difference other than sunlight won't hurt it as much. It's useful. It tends to be thinner than linen threads. Linen threads tend to start a bit thicker, but generally wax thread is the word you need to remember here. A lighter and beeswax. If you have thread that is not waxed, you can then wax it yourself doing the motion on screen. And a lighter, obviously, for melting that motherfucker. Okay, self-explanatory. And finally, a marble board or a pounding board. I use an acrylic board. As I've been saying here, you're going to need to hammer sharp objects through the leather. You're going to want something on the other side that isn't your antique, lovely varnish table. Otherwise, you'll be putting holes into it. I've done that a few times by mistake, and I always feel like an idiot. Learn from my mistakes. Don't punch holes through onto your nice tables. Have something underneath. I like acrylic because it has a certain level of bounce back on the other side, so that when the sharp forks come through, or the hole punch tool comes through, or any of the other tools I'll talk about in a second, come through the leather, it will dent only the acrylic a little bit without, what's the word when you make something less sharp? My brain, clearly. Blunting, yeah. It won't, don't damage tables. It won't blunt your tools as easily. That's why I like acrylic. Marble board will also work. It will still break into it, but it will blunt it a little bit more. You find specific boards for these all the time. I've even used a cutting board for the same reason as an acrylic board. I could actually believe that a cutting board is made from acrylic, or is it silicone, or is it rubber? I don't know. We're here to talk about leather, not cutting boards. Let's keep going. On that note, cheap tools are a great place to start with. You can go on Amazon and you can buy a leather starter set, and it will have tools that mostly work in there. Mostly. Some of them specifically don't. I will tell you about the ones to watch for in the next bit, because they like to tend to pile lots of different tools in these starter kits. But yeah, you'll get a fork punch in there, and it could last you a year if you look after it well enough. You'll get a rubber mallet with it too, most likely. It will generally give you most things you need to do in order to get started. It is a good place to start because it's cheap and it won't break the bank to get all of your basics in. As I'm sure you're probably expecting though, with basic and cheap tools, they're not going to last as long and they will be less consistent, which takes me on to advanced tools. The good thing with having high quality tools is they will be consistent, making your work cleaner, which is always important if you are competing with it. And it will last longer, which saves you money in the long run too. So here are a few tools that I will recommend to you now and explain why. I have spoken about this bad boy already, so I will move on. Burnishing tool. This is quite important if you are looking to do leather work competitively. Veg tan, when you cut it, it'll have like gritty bits that hang out the side from when you cut it because of the nature of how the skin is woven together. You'll want something that flattens those little scraggly bits coming out the side. This is called burnishing. That is a Dremel attachment version of it. On the right hand side is the most common type you see. It has a real name and it probably is burnishing tool. I colloquially name it the roly-poly boy because I struggle with the real name and I don't remember it. You can also buy burnishing tools that sort of work like a wheel that you hold in between your fingers and just roll across it. Essentially what you do is you hold it in your hand and you run those ridges, the actual indents, across the leather itself. But first, before you start running it across, you apply some of this stuff. Gum tragacanth, if I've ever said that word correctly. There is another version of this called, I think it's called burnishing gel. There's a Japanese one that's very popular too, called like Toko Komi, something like that. I think I have a picture of it here somewhere in a second. Burnishing gels are what you use. You put that across the edge and you quickly run across it with your burnishing tool and you flatten down those edges so you get a much smoother finish to it. Tokonolo, that's it. Okay, I said that horribly wrong. They do their own burnishing gel. Edge coat though, similar to our previous gum tragacanth, this is essentially paint that goes along the edge. This can give a nice finish specific times. A lot of the time, burnishing is all you need to do. With chrome tan pieces, you don't really burnish because it doesn't really fall apart at the edges the same way that veg tan does. But putting an edge coat over the edge is a nice finish to it. Essentially, let's say I have got a piece of brown leather and I want to finish the edges so they don't look raw and unkept. I just run edge coat over it with like a little wheel thing. I think it's just like a dye applique. I can't remember the name of this little bastard. And mine stopped working at that point too. You can use all kinds of things too. You can use brushes. You can use just a stick. You just dunk it in the stuff and run it over the edge, and it paints it and seals it to a certain extent too. Again, it's a good way for finishing your edges. And as we all know, unfinished edges when you're competing are a pretty big misdemeanor that you want to avoid. You wouldn't go into prejudging with raw edges on your dress. You're not going to go into prejudging after talking to me with raw edges on your leather pieces. This is a promise you're all going to make to me if you start leatherworking. You will never leave a raw edge. Okay. An edge bevel. This is a bastard that will trip you up if you are buying a cheap kit. An edge bevel, you may have seen this on YouTube videos where they like trim off the edge of the leather and leaves like this really long sort of noodle, the spaghetti boy. This is the tool that does it. Why do cheap ones fail you? I will tell you. The reason why is because they don't have a hollow grounding rod on the inside, or it's not a rod, it's a groove. That groove in more expensive hollow grounded edge bevel tools are what allow it to channel and run along the edge of that leather. So let's say you want to make a nice belt. Again, here we are, back on belts. And you want to make sure that the edges aren't sharp. You want like a nice sort of rounded finish on those edges. You run this across and that groove will follow the edge so it doesn't wobble or shake or go any direction it could otherwise go. Cheap tools tend to just be the sharp razor that a edge bevel will have. And if you don't have anything for it to follow, you can take a left turn and start gouging out your leather. You can use a cheap tool effectively if you have the consistency, patience, and strength to just run it over your edge and not wobble it at all, and your hands don't shake and leave it inconsistent. A expensive edge bevel tool is almost always better to start with if you are looking to cut off an edge. I stress this point quite firmly because the cheap tools are absolutely crap. Hollow grounded edge bevel is what you want. Oblong tool. I have so many of these ones. They're great. Again, for straps and buckles and belts, an oblong tool is what you want. This will mean that you are consistently making oblong holes. You may be wondering why you use an oblong hole. You use it for a belt buckle. So think about how a belt buckle works. You've got generally a square with a little prong, a tongue, whatever you call that, a prong in the middle of it, and that needs to poke through something. You want that little tongue, prong, whatever we're calling it, through a hole. It needs to be oblong because a belt buckle tends to go around itself. If you look at your belt that you're wearing right now, presumably you're all wearing belts, you'll see exactly what I mean with how it goes over on itself and it's an oblong hole that the prong is poking out through. This will allow it so that you're always punching the specific and correct measurement that you need. You get these in a range of different sizes. It depends on how big your buckle is. Not a euphemism. Keep it in mind, if you are looking to do belts consistently and easily, this will save you a lot of stress. I was a jackass when I started because I would first try and punch 2 holes either side and either cut it and bring it together, which looks kind of rough, or I took a fucking soldering iron to it and burned my way through the leather. Horrible smell. Don't recommend. It will work. I don't recommend it though. Okay, and a belt ending tool. We're back on belts. We're still on belts. We haven't left belts yet. You get a few different types of these. If you look at the end of a belt or even the end of a strap, you'll see that they're particularly common. There's a few common shapes for it. The one that you see now is called a church window. You also just get rounded ends too. It's just a good way of chomping off the square end of your belt, and now you have a nicer looking end to it. It's a good tool if you're going to be making a lot of belts. You may think you may not be making a lot of belts, by the way, but I assure you, you probably will be making a lot of belts. Great for straps too, great for a lot of things. This is handy to have, and I also recommend it, but you don't need it if you're getting started. It's just something nice to have if you are looking to be more consistent with your work. You could easily cut that shape in the leather, but it may be a bit rough. Again, the whole point of this tool is to give you a cleaner finish. Okay, you can use a thimble. to prevent your fingers from getting all calloused up. I don't. I've got callousy fingers. As I'm tapping my fingers on my keyboard when no one can see it right now. Wonderful. That was a visual gag that nobody got. Yeah, the one you see on the left is called a sailor's, not a sailor's thimble, sailor's palm, I think it's called. It's used for pushing a needle through a really, really thick material. I've seen people using those. I've seen people who wear like leather finger gloves. If you want to wear a condom for your fingers, you can do. I personally don't. It depends on how much you like having soft fingertips. I will say though, it is going to hurt your fingertips a lot when you get started. As you start doing a lot of hand sewing, you'll go to bed and wake up and your fingertips are going to really hurt. I need to stress that to you. Your fingers are okay. They will recover. It is hard skin growing on your fingertips from doing this repetitive action over and over again. If there's anyone here who does a lot of embroidery, you'll know that feeling already. And you'll probably be ready to go with leather for that point too. Keep that in mind. Pliers are useful in general for many things. I use pliers and leatherwork for when a needle gets stuck in a piece of leather and it won't come through trying to pull it through with my fingers. I get the pliers and I force the needle through. It's possible to damage your needle this way. I have broken a few needles because when it doesn't want to go through the leather, there's normally a reason why. Pliers are me telling it, I don't give a damn, and it's going through the leather. It can be useful. And lastly, a lacing and stitching pony. It looks kind of nefarious there, actually, because that's a dog collar on it. It's just essentially just a clamp that holds your leather together. You sit on top of it and you stitch through it. It keeps the two pieces firmly together so you can just go in and out really quickly. They're not commonly used these days. I can't think the last time I actually needed to use mine. It is a tool that exists. You may need it one day. It might help you. You now know that this thing exists. Okay, now we're going to talk about dyeing leather and painting leather. So, ways to change the color of your leather. Most commonly used for veg tan, because like we said earlier, it comes undyed. You can see some examples there in the middle and the left. That's what it looks like when you get your veg tan leather. How are you going to change it to a color you want? So, first of all, you can apply it on with a brush. That is leather paint we're starting with, okay. Yeah, you can brush it on. It will leave streaks, obviously. You can thin it down a little bit, but it tends not to be as strong. It tends to crack if it's thinned. Angelus leather paint is a great example because it does apply thick, but it will really coat. I have got a white leather belt because you can't dye leather white. Generally, you can only really dye leather darker tones, so I had to paint it. It has never cracked. It doesn't have any marks on it other than, the fact it's white and it gets stained from, general environmental hazards. Leather paint is fantastic for covering your leather. I know people who never dye their leather and they only paint it. Applying it with a brush, it is an option, will leave streaks. Applying it with an airbrush, you can do that. I know all of these leather paint companies sell a compatible thinner for it. They're also generally acrylic based, so you can water them down a little bit, but same rule applies. It might crack. Just airbrush, nice way to do it because it's thicker paint. It can clog your airbrush easier. Just keep in mind you may be doing more cleaning that way. But again, it will apply nicer with a more smooth finish without brush marks. And apply in layers too, yes. When you're building up paint layers, you'll generally see it gets to more one solid color as you keep building it up. You do one small thin layer and you're gonna see some inconsistencies with it. Leather paint, it makes sense. I'm sure most of you have used paint in some capacity here. You know how paint works. I'll stop teaching you to suck eggs. Leather dye now. This is what you're here for. So, no, I do put it on there actually. Dip dyeing. This is where you are getting a container, filling it with leather dye, and you are dipping your veg tan leather into it. That is what's happening there in the middle screen. It is a small plastic container with a small amount of leather dye in, and I'm dyeing parts of a pouch. I am just running it through one side and pulling out the other side. I tend to dip dye belts mostly now. What I'll do is I'll get a finished bottle of cola, like one of the, what are you, a liter? A 2-liter bottle of cola that's empty. I'll just cut out the bottom of it, make sure there is no liquid in the bottom of that, pour my leather dye into that, and I'll take one end of the leather, run it through, and just pull the leather through the dye until it comes out the other side all dyed. And then I pour the rest back into my leather bottle. Dip dyeing, pros and cons. Pro, you'll get a very consistent finish. Because you're fully submerging the leather under a liquid, it is going to absorb a lot of liquid. If you pull it through quickly, it won't absorb as much and will dye lighter. If you leave it under for a little bit, it will go darker and absorb more liquid. Makes sense, more consistent, good to know. The con of it is obviously it uses a lot of leather dye. Leather dye is expensive. That's a big one for me. I have got through so much leather dye trying to dip dye everything. It is a bit of a nightmare. A lot of people for this reason do sponge dyeing. You've probably seen it on YouTube tutorials where they get like a little bristle thing on a metal stick and they'll run that across the leather. Some people do use literal big sponges too to dye that way as well. Also works. Problem that I have with it is it does tend to absorb really well, so get a thicker amount of leather dye onto your leather. Why that's important will come clear in a second, but it will leave streaks if you're not doing it quick enough. As the leather dye dries, God, that's a mouthful. As the leather dye dries, you will start to see more where you've stopped and started with your stroke pattern. And you can't easily fix that without just making it darker and darker. It's worth keeping in mind though. If you're able to do it really quickly, you can save a lot of time and stress doing it that method. The method I most commonly use now though is airbrushing leather dye. I need to stress here, wear protective equipment, wear a respirator, have no pets in the room with you, try and do it in a ventilated space. The PSI setting on your airbrush needs to be low, ideally around 12. Why? The reason for it is if you're doing it in the 30s or the 40s like most airbrushes will generally default to, you're going to atomize a lot of that leather dye. You'll have a miasma, a big cloud in your room of leather dye, and it is horrible and hard to get the smell out. If it's on a lower PSI, it tends to throw out more liquid without atomizing it more. Yeah, so low PSI, and then all you're doing is literally spraying it across. It gives a really good finish, a really consistent too. It's great for doing big pieces of armor, as a good example. The problem with it, and the main drawback, other than the previously aforementioned safety hazard, is the fact that you are only dyeing the surface level. You can still dye the sides the same way, or the bottom of it, or, you know, whatever, but it's not absorbing that much leather dye. So you get a scratch across that, and what will be underneath it is that raw leather. I think it's the right word for it. You'll see the beige anyway. This can be an advantage. A wonderful South African creator, I think her name is Nikki. It's Luke's sister, anyway, if anyone knows her. She taught me a great method of using this to my advantage when it comes to weathering leather. Wrinkle it up and sandpaper over the top of it, and it will start to bring out some areas lighter. It feels like dry brushing leather because of it. It's a really cool technique to know, and I got that from a South African, so thank you guys. Anyway, good to know about these things. Those are your different dye methods, those are your different painting methods. A few quick things. You burnish leather after you dye it. I need to stress that to you. If you burnish it before, it will absorb weird because there's like a gel coating over your edges. Makes sense, it's not going to absorb as easily. Second thing is, wear gloves, and then wear a second pair of gloves on top of those gloves. Hands up, who in the room can imagine what happens to leather dye when it goes into your skin? I'm going to give you a hint here. You are also made of leather. Yeah, it should be no real surprise here that it's going to stain your skin, and it is hard to get out. You're going to be using acetone or IPA alcohol to get it off. It will come off your skin in time, but you're going to have leather dye on your hands for a while. Yes, you need to get new hands. I'm so sorry about that. We'll have to replace it. The reason I wear 2 pairs of gloves is I have worn gloves. They have ripped, only a small pinprick hole, you should keep in mind, and I have still got loads of leather dye through there, and now my hands are black and blue. And that's me. I'm now known as the guy with gangrenous hands. You know, I wear 2 pairs to make sure I got that got double Dutch level of safety over my skin. It is quite annoying when you get it on your hands. wear gloves, and generally wear clothes you don't mind getting leather dye onto, because it will also ruin that as well. You can't see my room, and I'm very grateful for that fact because it's a mess. There are a lot of splodges of leather dye on the floor in here, and I have a carpeted floor, so they're there for the rest of time. Yeah. Moving on. There's a few more photos from Wig as well. Aren't they wonderful? Okay, now we're going to talk stitching types for leather. I will blast through this because I know this is quite a dry bit. You don't need to know every type, but here's a few main ones to know about. The running stitch. Okay, so as you can see there, it is a single needle just running its way through the holes, and you get these little gaps in between. Good for doing decorative stitches, not so good for doing supportive stitches. Your bread and butter stitch is this next one. Saddle stitch. It's a double needle stitch. You'll see it is the same thread, but you have a needle at either end of it, and you start in the middle of your thread, and then you're looping it back across the same holes. That way, if one stitch breaks, the other will hold. What was it? Clair Obscura, for those who come after. Yep, there we are. It's a saddle stitch because it was commonly used for making saddles, and it was easy to repair as well. It tends to only be that strand that breaks. Can you see my mouse on the screen? I don't know. Say the strand in the middle here breaks, it will still hold up and the rest won't unthread, and you can quickly sew that back together before any further damage does, and just melt it back together again too. Saddle stitch is my favorite type of stitch because it's relatively relaxing to do. Good to know. That is what you'll commonly do for attaching two pieces of leather together most of the time. Next one is a box stitch. You use it for corners. It's quite specific. You really just use it for corners. I have used it for some pieces to different and varying levels of success. What you'll find is that there's always going to be one edge of your leather is exposed. So the leather structure does in itself need to be strong enough that it keeps it together. The stitch is more there to support it and make sure it stays in place. I've done collars as an example with box stitching. Doesn't work out well because it will still want to fall on itself in another way. If you're imagining you're making a leather pouch, you may want to box stitch the bottom. I've seen people make leather cubes. I don't know why you'd make a leather cube. People will buy anything. I mean, if people buy the live, laugh, love signs, they will actually buy anything. But a leather cube, you box stitch it. Box stitch is good to know about. It's not super common that you'll likely use it in costume making. Cross stitch, however, is going to be your second most common stitch. Two sides to it. You got the cross stitch on one side, and the other side just looks like straight lines. Use whichever side you prefer. I find some builds look better with cross stitches. I find others look a lot better with the lines from the stitch instead. Either way, cross stitch is really good for bringing two pieces of leather, separate pieces of leather, together side by side. So with foam, for example, you glue something together. With fabric, you'll have, what do we call it? Fuck, I can't remember. The extra seam allowance. There we go. I should know. I've been fucking cutting out jeans this morning. Seam allowance, and you sew where the lines up. With veg tan leather in particular, you put the two pieces of leather together and you sew it this way, and that combines the two. Saddle stitch used for combining two pieces of leather on top of each other. Most of the time, I'm just trying to think if there are any exceptions. You'll use saddle stitch for doing chrome tan pieces, and you will use seam allowance for that. But for veg tan, use this bad boy. Keep this one in mind. It's your second most used stitch. Whip stitch, again, it's purely decorative. You're just running a single line around the edges. It can give a nice finish on pieces. Everyone's looking at that photo. You can all see it's beautiful. Masterpiece, chef, bon appetit. Moving on. Baseball stitch. I don't think I have ever used a baseball stitch. I think I actually prejudged one person once in my life who baseball stitched a piece of armor, and it was really cool how they did it. I use baseball stitch style for lacing, for like pieces I want to undo, like a gorget, and I need it to attach together. It's very rare you see this. It's called a baseball stitch because you see it on a baseball. The more you know. There you go. Now we're on to machine sewing. Wigwig are quite adamant that they wanted to include this bit. Garment leather is not vinyl. Apparently this is a misunderstanding in America right now. Do not ask me why. I know it's not vinyl. I'm hoping anyone could look at it and know that it's leather and not vinyl. Some people don't know the difference. There we go. You know now that garment leather is not vinyl. Okay, can you machine sew leather? Yes, and maybe. With thin garment leather, you can. Easily enough. You get a Teflon foot, which is top right, you get a leather needle, and it will go through the veg tan, the chrome tan leather. The same way you would make a normal jacket is the same way that you would make a leather jacket. That stays the same. It's worth knowing. Use a Teflon foot because it won't get stuck on the leather. It will allow it to glide across when you're going through and sewing it. The strong thing that you need to take away from this, though, is that once you have poked a hole through the leather, it is there forever. That hole is now permanent. That is the leather now. That leather has that hole. You cannot undo that hole. It could turn that into a haiku, actually, but I won't. So, keep that in mind. So if you're backstitching, you are going to be putting a lot more holes than you may want to. So make sure you're being very careful. I recommend if you're starting, you hand stitch everything. It will take longer, but at least you won't ruin your leather, mess up and have to start again. Work towards machine sewing if you're more comfortable. Thicker pieces of leather, though, you cannot machine sew normally. So anything above 1 millimeter is what I'd say. Actually, no, anything above 1.5, I'd say. 1.5 millimeter chrome tan, you cannot easily machine sew. It will feel like you're going uphill. Veg tan, you cannot machine sew full stop on a normal sewing machine. You need something called a walking machine. They may not actually be called walking machines now that I think about it. They just look like a guy walking on top of it. It is a powerful needle that is going through the leather without breaking, and it has a very strong grip on it. They tend to be quite expensive. You only really see it in industrial usage. Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else I can say on that point. Really, you're only going to have a machine like that if leather is your whole life and it's also your career. I don't have one myself because I don't want to put that level of investment into equipment. I'd rather just happily hand sew. I don't mind hand sewing. Yeah, it hurts my hands, but you know what? It's kind of chills to watch something and, you know, going through the holes. Here we go. Life is... Oh, God, what's the editing phrase? Life is a door, Ed boy. God, why the fuck am I saying that? Yeah, you're going to mess up your machine if you try and go through veg tan leather normally. You could theoretically machine sew leather on a normal machine that is veg tan if you pre-punched the holes and you have mathematically calculated the stitch distance so it goes through perfectly. But if your needle, even if it's a leather needle, hits veg tan, it's going to either break or get stuck. It will not really go through. You need a proper heavy-duty machine to make that work. Keep that in mind. For that point too, some obvious things. Use pins sparingly and intelligently because you are going to be punching more holes than you need to. Yeah, and it can relax a bit. So leather is skin. Keep that in mind. Sometimes things will make it warp. Garment leather in particular, thin chrome tan specifically, if it gets in contact with fire or heat, it will shrink. Imagine it's, you know, you're quite literally putting scars on something. I've done branding in leather before, and you will see that it reacts in an interesting way. Veg tan, boosh, it's in. With chrome tan, it will shrink in pain and cry out and want help. Anyway, keep those points in mind. If you want to, you will see a lot of videos, actually, they keep popping up on my reels, but it's probably because I look at a lot of leather stuff. People machine sewing belts. It is all those walking machines. Great thing to have, a lot of money if you don't. I can't recommend it, I just tell you to hand sew it instead. And here are a cool few photos. Shoes, I can't believe we've gone through this without talking about shoemaking. Yeah, shoemaking, you will absolutely want to use leather for it. It's robust. Because of how the wet molding process works, it will take to the shape of your foot too after you break it in. That's what breaking in really is. It's just wet molding to your feet because of sweat. Gross, but true. Leather working great for shoes. Unga bunga. Holsters for guns, that's always a nice thing to have. Harnesses for a variety of things too because they're useful. Um, Robin put that photo there, bottom in the middle, the Superman mask. He worked on The Boys. I'm pretty sure the photo in the top left is from The Boys, the Amazon TV show. If you don't know it, you have to go and do team practice for League of Legends. Wow. I'm glad it's been helpful. Thank you, though. We are nearly at the end of this anyway. There's my druid outfit there in the middle. Above that are all the belts I made for my Anjanath and Monster Hunter. Top right is a set of samurai armor that Rob made for Jason Momoa. And bottom right is a chrome tan embossing technique that I do where you're sort of gluing on top of veg tan pieces. Great use for leather, has a great range of effect. I hope these pictures are in itself interesting enough to make you consider doing these things. There are some points I haven't spoken about here. Embossing, carving, tooling, and wet molding. I haven't covered those because they are a bit more in depth. I'll be happy to talk about some of these more advanced techniques further down the line. They are more nice ways of adding embellishments into leather. Bottom right as an example. On the druid outfit there too, you'll see carved leather panels. They're just nice ways to add cool little details. And wet molding is a good way to make something take a very specific shape, but I will come to that another time with you all. Or if you really want to know more, feel free to drop me a message on Instagram and I'll talk with you anything you need to know. If there's a particular leather project you want to do, feel free to send me a photo and I'll tell you what kind of leather you need. To that point, resources. Okay, so I know of one place in South Africa that I went to myself that was pretty good. It was in Cape Town. There was a leather store. I don't remember the name of it. They had a lot of stuff there, including belt blanks, hardware such as buckles, a huge selection of chrome tan and veg tan leathers. My only thing I'd say is it is expensive, and it was in kind of a shady area of Cape Town. Could have been Woodheads. Actually, that sounds about right, come to think of it. It was a really cool place for getting pieces. Yeah, just keep in mind that I would probably Uber there back and forth, just for your own safety. Actually, that particular area wasn't too bad. It was further down the road after I walked for about 20 minutes. That was kind of dodge. It was a good place for getting everything you need, though. That is the point I was going with. Amazon will also sell some of these equipments. I can recommend ones for the UK. I think they will ship to you. Keep in mind, it may be more expensive, but I do hope you appreciate the fact that I know resources closer to where I live because I order from them and I have experience with them and I can vouch for them. You do not need to order from Tannery Row in US Chicago. I highly don't recommend that. It was a cool leather store. If any of you win Crown, give it a visit. It's pretty cool. They have a lot of scrap leather there. And then you have a few good resources too. Etsy is good for getting leather patterns. Patterns, as with everything, you have good patterns, you'll have a good product. If I could master anything, it would always be patterning. Leatherpatterns.com. Tandy Leather have some pre-made kits also. Tandy Leather used to be a superstore. They have been declined more and more. You still get a few stores in America and some in Europe. I don't think you have them in South Africa. We don't have them in the UK. It's essentially a shop, and people will try and tell you every single tool that you need to buy and make sure you're spending all your money. They will try and take you through the circus there. Weaver Leathers, they do have some good resources online. They also got some good tutorial videos on YouTube. Same with the Leather Guy for that point too. Global Leathers, I don't really need. Lambskins, yeah, they're all right actually from there. I use a few in the UK. Again, though, I can recommend you UK shops if you want UK shops. Just drop me a message for it. And for that point, let's come to questions, because I can already see a question in our chat. Please, ask your questions now. We'll start off with any recommendations for conditioning. Is it something to focus on? Generally, no. Generally, leather conditioning is not something I overly worry about. It is just a way of trying to make leather softer. My advice, if you're making this from scratch, if you need something to be flexible, so it's soft and will move easier, use chrome tan. Just that simple. If you need to have a very specific type of veg tan that is going to move, generally see if you can use a thick chrome tan instead, because you can still get thick chrome tan, still relatively durable, but in general, I don't worry about it that much. It's something that you more use for like old pairs of shoes that are starting to lose their luster as they're getting old in life, and you want them to have some more movement again, or to help you form into it and make them more comfortable. Yeah, I don't worry about it too much. I can give you great tips on how to make it so it's not conditioned and it's fucking rock solid, because you learn that by trial and error. If you add IPA alcohol or acetone to your leather, it will remove some of the dye. Same reason it gets it off your skin. But it will start making the leather really firm and hard because it is taking, I don't know what it's doing to it actually. It's fucking up your leather though, I can tell you that much. Hot water will also do it. If you put something in hot water, it will become firmer. This is why it is commonly used for wet molding leather. Wet molding, again, to take a particular shape. That mask there, for instance, that is over that head, that is being wet formed onto it. So it takes all of those shapes despite being a flat cutout first. Great technique, wet molding. I don't overly have time to go into it in depth here because we've already shot over to an hour. Okay. Yeah, it dries that shit right out. Any more questions? I can see a lot of you. Oh, here we go. Good timing. Oh yes, like for horse riding, we need to keep our tack soaped, clean condition, oiled super regularly. Now, yes, tack goes through. Yep. Again, good example of where you'd use leather conditioners. Saddles are a big one. Saddle making industry is a great way to make money in America. It is a cutthroat market out there. And Jesus, I would say I can't even make a leather saddle myself because they are very complicated. I probably could, but I actually would be more comfortable doing a class on it. Anyway, that wasn't your question. Your question was, is there a way to keep projects soft and supple? It ties back into our last question. You can get specific conditioners for leather. They will help make them soft and subtle. God, I can't say the word. It will make it softer. The difference is very much marginal. I would say it's, again, more of a case where you need to break it in where you need to break it in, and when it has the wrinkles in, it will move. That's the best way I can put it for especially veg tan leather, which is what they tend to make saddles out of for that point. Sorry I might have missed it, but when you were speaking about it, but making your own patterns for leather, would it be the same as how you make patterns for clothes, seam allowance, or would it be more like EVA foam? Great question. The answer is yes. So, if you take a pattern for fabrics, for making, let's say, a jacket, you can one-to-one transition that directly onto chrome tan leather. Say about 1 millimeter thick, 0.8 millimeters thick. That same pattern will work for the chrome tan leather. For veg tan pieces, EVA foam patterns will work. You may just need to think about how you sew bits together. So take, for example, a knee pad where it will have like a curve that meets in the middle. You will need to sew that together instead of glue it together instead. Those patterns, though, will work one-to-one. One thing I didn't talk about here, too, is mock-ups. So if you want to do a mock-up for leather, if it's veg tan, I recommend using low-density EVA foam for all of it, because it generally has the same movement in the same thickness. If you are making a piece of armor that is 3 millimeters thick for your leather, do it at a 3 millimeter thick low density EVA foam to get a mock-up. If you're doing again, we're going to the leather jacket comparison, and you want to sew that, then you should make a mock-up out of, you can use, again, low density EVA foam. It will work. It will just not have the exact same fit and it won't sit the same way, is the best way to put it. It doesn't drape as nicely. You can use, what's the stuff called? Use it in crafts all the time. Someone help me out here. What's the name of that stuff? Felt. Is it felt? I'm pretty sure it's felt. You can use felt for a mock-up with it. Generally speaking, any sort of heavy weave will kind of stay the same. Pleather doesn't really work the same way leather does because of the interfacing on the back. I'm pretty sure it was felt that I used back when I was doing those mock-ups. It was some furry little fabric anyway. You have to run, but thank you. You're very welcome, Hermes. God of speed, you have to run, no pun. I like that. Any more questions? Don't be shy. Again, if anyone does have questions that pop up after the fact, you are still welcome to message me afterwards. You're always welcome to. I can see a bunch of you typing again. I don't know at what point I cut this. I feel like your questions are either really long and complicated. Like I said, if questions come up after the fact, you're welcome just to reach out and message me. I love talking about leather. Anyone who knows me knows that I love talking about leather. Always happy to talk about it. You kept your saddle alive for almost 12 years. I'm hoping you use your tips to get me started in leatherwork so I can turn it into a memorial piece. I'll repair. Yeah, you'll absolutely be able to repair a saddle. Making a saddle from scratch is really fucking hard. It's much more complicated than people realize. You could definitely do repair jobs on it though. That's how I ended up working with leather in the first instance. Is I had a set of leather armor and I just had to repair it one day because pieces of it were falling apart. And I looked at this and went, huh, it really is just holes punched through at first, isn't it? And that is how I got started. How does one tell the difference between leather and pleather? You will know. You'll look at the one side and you'll see it has white interfacing on the back. It looks like a bit of a grid system thing. It also doesn't look the same or feel the same. You'll definitely know it's pleather. If you're talking about in garments, when it's already sewn together, how do you tell the difference between a leather jacket and a pleather jacket, as again in the jacket example? You can sort of tell from feeling it. It does feel more plasticky when it's pleather. It doesn't quite move the same way. It's kind of specific that you kind of know it from looking at it is the best way to tell you. And also the biggest thing you'll know is in about a year's time, that leather jacket will start flaking off. You'll see bits of it that sort of fall away and all you can see is like a horrible sort of undertone. Leather won't do that to you. Leather will stay the same forever. You might get a few scuffs and scratches into it, but it won't just start shedding its skin like a lizard. I've been burnt by way too many leather jackets on that note. They look really cool, they're really affordable, and then suddenly your leather jacket is now leaving a mess everywhere you go. I discovered that on an airplane, of all places, to realize I was shedding my skin. Okay, I'll take one more question because I can see somebody typing, so please feel free to ask. I can see someone typing there. While I'm waiting for that question, I will say, Liza P, again, I was saying at the beginning, it is an amazing game. Go play it. Is there any type of material that's the best to mix with leather? Like if you need to sew leather to another material. The best is very specific. You can generally sew most leather to different materials relatively okay. Thinner pieces, less so. Heavy weaves do tend to take to it better. It generally just needs to be a strong material. So twill does take to it okay. Linens mostly do, not all linens, most of them do. If it's a big weave with lots of holes into it, then it is just going to tear away from the leather given time. Tightly woven weaves of linen will be okay. Jersey material can be okay, depends how stretchy it is. Cotton is generally all right too. It depends on how strong the material itself is. If you can tear it with your bare hands by putting stress onto it, probably won't hold leather very well. You realistically sew it together the same way you do most things. When it comes to it, I generally sew the leather on top and hand stitch it on, but you can still sew leather panels together. It just requires math, and I hate math. All right, on that note, I will wrap up here. Yep, there's a good example of pleather. You can see the interfacing on the back of it. That is how pleather works. It's given structure and shape from the backing, not the plastic material on top. Oh, thank you. You've been a lovely audience. Thank you for listening to me waffle on there. Like I said, and again I stress it to you, if you need help with anything, if you have questions, if there is a particular project that you're looking at and don't know where to start, I can talk you the right direction as best I can. There are some specific patterns and types of leather you see in film and TV that are particular types of leather within themselves. So an example for that is I know Vikings, they tend to use pre-embossed chrome tan leather. There's an example for it. You'll find different patterns of leather online too. You'll find cowhide or alligator-looking leathers that are still from cows. You can find all kinds of unique things. I'll be happy to point you the right way anytime. So feel free to reach out. Yeah, thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you
You've been
for
a
joining us
wonderful
again.
audience.
It's always
There's
a pleasure
another voice.
to have
I've
you
not heard a human voice for a while. It's my pleasure.
We will
I've just spoken non-stop
inevitably
for an
call
hour
you
and I've
back
not had
for
human
something.
contact for a while. Again, it's my pleasure. Thank you
Awesome.
everybody for coming.
Thank you, and hope to hear from you again soon. And thank you guys, everyone, for joining. And see you guys soon.
Bye bye.
Bye.